Hey, what's up? I'm Darkbblue, trying to help you enjoy games in depth. In this Health Clock video, I'll cover all the knowledge you need throughout campaign, from Fresh Start to New Game Plus 2. It's like a walkthrough guide where I'll give you new information based on the current progression. But different from a walkthrough guide, I'll be more concise rather than detailing every walkthrough step. Starting at Act 1, you should be able to finish Floor 3 and have your friend rescued. This unlocks the shop, where you can buy blessed gear to strengthen your character. Then, with the help of blessed gears, you should be able to finish the boss fight in Floor 7. This unlocks the Great Bell, an important meta progression system. You can notice some nodes are larger than the others. Prioritize at them. Additionally, the boss will also give you a unique relic reward, which is commonly tied to a certain skill. You want to use that skill as your main damage dealer so that you could benefit fully from this relic and become much stronger. Here's also a trick. You can have less than 5 skills equipped when beginning a round. This makes it easier to obtain upgrades for your main damage dealer skill when leveling up. Starting from Floor 8, you will notice significant rise of enemy power. So to finish the remaining floor 8 all the way to 21, you need to do a bit meta progression. The most important thing to do is the Great Bell. Go all the way down to grab 2 relic slots upgrades and 1 max skill level upgrade. To get bell points faster, you can recycle the useless relics and blessed gears. The other important meta progression is relic. Previously, you have obtained 1 unique relic. Then you need to build around that relic, looking for other uniques tied to the same skill. To do so, you want to save some gold to spend it rerolling Blessings of Legacy, instead of spending all the gold on the Blessings of Foundation. Also remember to upgrade your relics using Soulstone. As you progress into deeper floors, you start to see totems of the future, which sell blessed gears or relics. Here, what we care more about is relics. So you may have noticed that you cannot equip duplicate uniques. So to fill the remaining relic slots, we need rare relics. 2 rare relics with the same core ethics can be equipped at the same time, making rares highly strong for stat stacking. Then to get useful rares, you need to exploit Blessings of the Future, which also requires gold. In general, you are likely to finish Act 1 in 6 attempts. What you see in the background right now is my 4th attempt, so the damage is a bit low. If you have already accomplished the larger nodes in the bottom middle section of the Great Bell, the next goal is to go bottom left. This branch will be unlocked once you finish Act 1. Into Act 2, spec into the left branch of the bell to get max skill level and relic slot upgrades. This will give you an easy start during Act 2. You will also find some new skills are unlocked to be purchased in the skill book. You can switch to a new build using these new skills, but it's also perfectly fine to stay to the previous build. But even if you choose to stick to the same build as before, you can replace your old relics with higher tier ones gradually. In addition, a supporting skill called Judgment will be unlocked in Act 2, which shreds enemy resistance. You can equip this skill for additional damage. Starting from Act 2, you will see more crafting dues drop, with additional drops from recycling relics, so it's time to learn how to craft. You should prioritize higher tier relics for crafting, but even T1 relics are worth crafting too. At the current stage, what you need to learn is rerolling explicit affix and adding imbuement affix. So how to reroll explicit affix? You can use this tool to reroll 1 random affix and use this locking tool to randomly lock 1 affix. Combining the two, rerolling explicit affix is very straightforward. Then what affix are we looking for? In fact, most affixes are helpful during Act 2, except max conviction and damage bonus that doesn't align with your main damage dealer's tags. So it'll be very easy to get good outcomes from explicit affix rerolling. For additional information, explicit affixes are divided into primary ones and secondary ones, similar to prefix and suffix division. Secondary affix mostly provides resistance, gold gain, experience gain, and other defense or supporting effects. Primary affix, on the other hand, gives you important boost for offense and defense. Since one-slot relics have only secondary affix, I suggest rerolling only relics that are at least 2 slots large. Then to imbue a relic, you need these 3 imbuement tools. If you use such a tool on a relic that already has an imbuement affix, the existing affix will be replaced, effectively rerolling the imbuement affix. Red imbuement relates to life, fire, and melee. Blue imbuement relates to mana, lightning, and spell. Green imbuement relates to evasion, plague, and marksman. Additionally, all the 3 relate to physical. You can choose the suitable color for your build based on this information. As you progress further into Act 2, a new meta progression system called Constellation will be unlocked. You can basically treat it as an additional skill tree. For example, here I choose to spec into the red cluster to the left of the starting point. This will solve my mana system once and for all. All I need is to bring a melee skill with me to stack some vigor once in a while. To earn more constellation points, you need to purge cursed shrines. You can click on this question mark to see how many cursed shrines are remaining. All in all, add on to your previous knowledge that you can switch to higher tier relics, craft relics, and spec into constellations. This will bring you through Act 2 at ease. When you complete Act 2 for the first time, you'll be sent into Act 3 instantly. Just explore around and go back to the camp when the bottom right branch of the bell will unlock. During Act 3, 2 additional supporting skills, the 2 prayers, will unlock. One gives you bonus crit chance and crit damage, and the other gives you passive life regen. You might have noticed that the default passive life regen is 0, meaning you have to use a potion to restore life. Therefore, I strongly recommend this life regen prayer, as it gives you at least a 5% passive life regen. Then you can just follow the previous progression methods and beat Act 3. This will be rather easy. As you approach Act 4, the difficulty further goes up, but the Great Bell's large nodes are already taken. In this case, how could we further strengthen our character? 1. Replace more relics with higher tier versions. Now you should be able to find T3 relics pretty frequently. And 2. Keep upgrading your relics. And 3. Spec into certain small nodes of the bell, prioritizing at damage nodes and in-run progression nodes such as gold gain and experience gain. Also, don't forget to spend your newly earned constellation points. When you complete Act 4, 3 things will be unlocked: Ascension Mode, New Game Plus, and Endless Nightmare. Among them, Ascension Mode is a separate experimental game mode that requires a new save file to play. I will use a dedicated video for it. For now, let's enter New Game Plus. In Hellclock, the max New Game Plus is New Game Plus 2. Each New Game Plus brings more stat penalty and better loot. You need to gradually finish all the 3 rounds of campaign. Endless Nightmare, on the other hand, is the game mode added by the Nightmare Journey. Its difficulty goes from T1 all the way to T16. T1 to T12 correspond to exactly Act 1 in New Game Plus 0 to Act 4 in New Game Plus 2, and T13 Plus are even harder than the hardest content in New Game Plus 2. Endless Nightmare also provides many mechanics helpful for target farming, so I suggest pushing the progression in New Game Plus and Endless Nightmare in parallel. For example, after you beat Act 1 in New Game Plus 1, you can do a T5 Endless Nightmare run. First, let's do some preparation for New Game Plus 1. The first thing to do is to check the Great Bell. You'll find it replaced by a new bell layout with all the points respect for free. This new layout is more organized. Top middle is in-run and meta progression nodes like gold gain. Bottom middle is offense nodes with some crit nodes to its left. Bottom right is life nodes. Bottom left is evasion and attack speed. The rightmost nodes are resistance, and the leftmost nodes are mana related. My advice is to spec into offense nodes and progression nodes in the middle first, then spec a bit into resistance nodes to compensate for the resistance penalty in New Game Plus. The second preparation is to cat your resistance, a classic looter ARPG activity. Check your character panel and see the resistance gap. Besides the bell nodes mentioned just now, you can also obtain resistance from blessed gears. To fish for blessed gears, you can reroll the shop using Soulstone. With new blessed gears equipped, if there's still resistance gap, fill it with resistance affix on relics. The third preparation is to address the recovery issue for better survivability and sustainability. Previously, we've been using Prayer of Health for life regen. Now with the new bell tree, you can find some life regen nodes in the bell for additional regen stacking. This will further strengthen your life regen. With the preparation done, you can gradually push through New Game Plus 1 and Endless Nightmare T5 to T8. During this process, you want to replace your relics with at least T3 versions and keep upgrading them. You also want to further spec into the new bell and earn some more constellation points by purging cursed shrines. I believe it'll be rather easy to finish the first 3 acts in New Game Plus 1, but Act 4 can be a bit hard. This means it's time to learn how to farm relics. First of all, relics in this game can be divided into rares and uniques. Normal and magic relics can be upgraded to rares, so they count as rares. The core affix of rares and uniques rose from 2 separate pools. Furthermore, you cannot equip duplicate uniques but can with rares. Therefore, you want a mixture of uniques and rares, not pure uniques nor pure rares. Also, the way to farm uniques and rares are totally different, so let's start with uniques. To farm uniques, you want to spend lots of gold re-rolling the blessings of legacy rewards given after survival fights and boss fights, until you find what you need. I believe you are already familiar with this, so let's talk something new. So look at this. On the top left corner of the constellation menu, you can see the so-called affinity points of 3 colors. You earn these affinity points by completing a full constellation cluster. Besides unlocking new clusters, these points have another use. They can affect how uniques drop in 2 ways. First, a part of uniques, usually uber uniques, have a minimum affinity requirement. If it's not met, they won't drop at all. Second, each unique has at least 1 affinity color. If your affinity points satisfy, 1 color's point is more than the other 2's, and it's at least 4 points. Then, the uniques having affinity with this color will get 100% bonus drop chance. Some information sources also say the more the color's point is, the extra bonus you'll receive, but I'm not 100% sure about this. So how could we know affinity requirement and affinity color? Well, they are not shown anywhere in-game. You need to go to this webpage. In general, you need to first check the requirement and affinity of the uniques you want, then respec your constellation so that you can meet the requirement and get the drop chance bonus. Since this might weaken your build, you can go back to Act 1 of New Game Plus 1 to farm uniques. Next, it's time for rares. The best way to farm rares is to exploit a blessings of the future. The totem at the end of each floor has a chance to be replaced by a future totem, where I feel the deeper you go in one round, the higher the replacement chance. Sometimes the totem sells blessed gears, and sometimes relics. What we want is relics. You will notice that each time you reroll the reward, 3 rares and 1 unique are provided. In this way, you can fish for good rares by rerolling. But wait, what exactly is a good rare? This relates to the shape of relics. For uniques, the core affix is tied to its shape. For example, I'm using a unique, saying more repeater damage against slowed enemies. This affix always appears on one-slot uniques. But rares, they are different. On one hand, if you manually craft a magic relic into a rare relic, the core affix can only roll from a shape-specific pool. But on the other hand, if a rare is naturally dropped, it can roll any core affix. This means the smaller rares we have, the more core affixes we can fit into the limited relic slots. So we are hunting for smaller, naturally dropped rares. But it's not a good idea to use one-slot rares only. That's because one-slot rares have only secondary affix, but no primary affix, and their imbuement affix rolls are mostly defensive. Therefore, we are looking for a mixture of one-slot and two-slot rares that are naturally dropped, trying to shrink the number of four-slot rares. With the goal clarified, you can go back to Act 1 of New Game Plus to save some gold for Blessing Ray rolling. Right now, the overall target is to replace all relics into at least T3 versions, and at the same time replacing your rare relics into a mixture of one-slot and two-slot rares. This will greatly boost your build power and help you through Act 4 and T8. Of course, you don't really need to max out your rares at the current stage. Moderate optimization is enough. By the way, I want to update our previous mana sustain solution. Previously, we were using this constellation cluster, but since Vigor can only be generated with a melee skill, we were forced to bring the melee skill in one of the limited skill slots. Now with more constellation points, we can further spec into this yellow cluster and the green cluster near the starting point. This allows you to generate agility orbs when defeating mobs or hitting elites, and generating vigor when generating agility orbs. In this way, you no longer need that melee skill, making the room for another supporting skill. As you approach New Game Plus 2, there's more to do besides compensating for the new resistance penalty. That is to further optimize our builds. A build should perform well in three aspects: damage, survivability, and rotation. At the current stage, the way to improve damage is to replace more rare relics with smaller ones. As for rotation, it's already solved by the constellation solution introduced just now. What we care more about is survivability, or specifically, it's further divided into defense and recovery, aka the ability to absorb more damage and the ability to recover from damage. Our previous practice of stacking life regen effectively addresses recovery. However, defense needs more love. In Hellcloak, survivability can be done in two ways: life stacking and mana stacking. Here, I only introduce life stacking, which is more straightforward. First of all, you need to stack life, which gives you a base max hit. This is not enough. With only life and nothing else, it's likely that you get one tapped by some dangerous attacks. What you need is to further stack endurance. This stat converts at least 75% of the damage taken into dot, which greatly amplifies your base max hit. To stack endurance, you need a Great Bell, red imbuement on one-slot relics, and blast gears. Note that previously, you were mostly using blast gears that provide resistance. Now you can replace them with blast gears that provide defense stats, such as endurance, and get the lost resistance from relics. Only after life and endurance stacking is it the time for evasion. Evasion gives you a chance to ignore an attack, so it improves your effective HP, but not max hit. To stack evasion, you can invest into the Bell, green imbuement on one-slot relics, blast gears, and certain constellations. Additionally, there's a 1-slot unique relic that gives you huge evasion based on how many agility orbs you have. Building up your defense layer according to the information above and continuing your process of adding small rare relics, upgrading relics, and earning constellation points, you will be able to get through the first 3 acts in New Game Plus 2. Now, to further beat Act 4, it's time to learn something more about crafting, corruption, and divine. First off, divine. You can notice that most affix on the relic has a rolling range. Therefore, most time what you are using right now cannot hit the max range. This is when divine tools come into use. It can increase the value of all the affix by random margins. Note 3 things. First, if you are familiar with divine orbs in Path of Exile, divine tools are different from them in that a divine tool always increases the values, where only the margin is random. And 2, you can spam divines until a relic hits max roll. There's no limit in how many divines you can use on the relic. And 3, divining a relic in fact can make its rolling exceed the max range a bit. Then, when corrupting a relic, there can be 4 effects, all happening randomly with the uniform chance. 1. No effect at all. 2. Equal to applying multiple divine tools. 3. Equal to applying multiple tinkering tools. And 4. Adding a new corruption affix. No matter which one happens, this relic will be locked. No further crafting other than upgrading can be done to it. What we want here is the final effect. The first 2 effects are quite useless, but at least safe. The real risk is the third effect, as it can really ruin your relic. However, there's a trick to lower the risk. You can lock the most important affix before corrupting the relic, so it won't change even with effect 3. My suggestion is to divine rare relics, uber uniques, and the uniques that have very large rolling range and thus high reward from divining. For the other uniques, corrupt them. When you corrupt a relic, you should first have its explicit affix rerolled and have it imbued, then corrupt it before upgrading, so that you don't waste any soulstone. You need to do corruption in batch until you get lucky and hit a good affix. So you need a lot of unique bases and a lot of imbuement tools. To farm the bases, refer to the previous farming introduction. But for imbuement tools, well, it's really a problem right now. I hope the devs could implement some system to make imbuement tools easier to get. All in all, after you divine and corrupt some of your relics, you should be able to finish Act 4 and T12. After that, you can further challenge yourself with T13 to T16. But that requires more knowledge of theory crafting, which will be introduced in the next video. If you want to play games into depth together with me, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, see you around.